Sister, please. This way.
Back off, you spooky bitch!
Ganning into The Nun, I was a wee bit cautious because on the one hand, I like a good horror film, and the only other movie I've seen in the marketing-friendly Conjuring universe I personally felt was actually a pretty solid and enjoyable flick. But on the other hand, fuck this bit in the trailer. Fuck it to hell, you fucking evil, scary twat. Every fucking time this ad came on during the previews, every fucking time, without fail, even when I knew what was coming, I'd still end up shitting enough bricks that you could have built a mansion so big, even Kanye West would have saw it and went, ooh, I think that's a bit excessive. It's not that horror films have all that profound an effect on me particularly. I mean, a rare good one can really sit in the back of my mind and leave a lasting impact, but for the most part, especially in the big box office releases made to appeal to a wide market, the genre has become over-reliant on jump scares. Now obviously jump scares are capable of shocking me in the moment. After all, they give me the same uncomfortable, involuntary reaction that's biologically programmed into pretty much everyone, but as a general rule, other than the quick shock, I'd say they rarely make me sweat. And once I've seen a film that uses them a second time, my general feeling towards their oncoming present is, this again. This fucking jump scare though, for some fucking reason, the second I see this lass walk down that hallway followed by this evil ass ninja penguin, something inside my body just goes, oh no. Now knowing that just the trailer was capable of making me feel more anxious than being forced into a situation of making awkward small talk with a stranger who casually drops into conversation that he'd love to wear Ron Weasley's skin before giving me a look that lingers a little too long and saying, you look kinda like him, you know, I can't say I was looking forward to this one. I mean, not in the traditional sense anyway. I was excited for what, in my opinion, looked like a truly terrifying and atmospheric watch, but at the same time I did worry that the 1.5 hours it was on would be about as comfortable an experience for me as being on fire. Now the question is, was it as good or as horrifying as I had hoped and feared? Well, yes and no. The Nun follows the plot of Father Burke, a troubled priest, and a young nun's sister Irene, who are sent to Romania to investigate a suicide at an abbey there. And with the help of a local delivery boy called Frenchie, who initially found the victim's body, they uncover the abbey's unholy history and a dark entity still lurking inside it. The Nun is almost a very good movie. Almost. As far as horror films go, you can definitely do a hell of a lot worse, and it has a lot of really strong things going for it. For a start, it looks and sounds absolutely incredible. It's the second most expensive film in the series, and my good God does it show. The atmospheric pull of the haunted abbey ground, shrouded in eerie fog that slowly dances over the decrepit ruin of well-aged stone, is mesmerizingly good set design. This place feels evil as shit. In the best possible way, it feels almost cheesy, but like in a good way. I know that sounds like a criticism, but when was the last time you saw a wide-release horror movie set in one of those classic, stereotypical horror locations, like a big old Transylvanian castle on the top of the hill, or a dark and stormy graveyard hidden away by a deep forest? Its setting, at least to me, evoked the spirit of the classic 1930s Universal monster movies, with their big, dramatically gothic sets, albeit through the $22 million Hollywood modern day filter, and I personally loved that. From the dank, dusty hallways, to the creaking old mechanical doors, to the degraded and damp wooden crosses, everything about the world I was being shown here absolutely reeked of classical horror presentation and benefited massively from all the atmosphere and demanding presence that comes with that territory. The sense of horror this place brought was also aided massively by Abel Korzeniowski. I absolutely butchered that pronunciation. I apologise to everyone Polish, who's giving his all with an excellent score that could have easily played it safe with just some drawn-out violin strings, but instead chose to let the setting inform the sound, incorporating elements of religious chanting and unsettling groans into the tracks that accompany the on-screen torment. Honestly, I have no idea what this guy is even doing on this film. I'm glad he's there, as he certainly adds a lot to the final piece. But this is the dude that was also trusted to do the 2004 rescoring of Metropolis. He feels like a bigger deal than a Conjuring film, but well done fella, you put your every effort into it all the same, hats off to you lad. The performances are also on point as well, with the main three characters feeling like they each carry their own unique voices and presence in the narrative. Father Burke feels suitably serious and burdened, Sister Irene immediately warm and humble, and Frenchie has a nice roguish charm that carries throughout the whole picture. So with all this praise I'm heaping on it, you might be wondering why I'm hesitant to fully recommend it. And the thing is, what really massively holds it back is its plot and scares. This film certainly has no shortage of character. I love the setting, I love the music, I love the performances, but it feels like everybody, from the actors to the musicians to the location scouts and set designers, are putting a 12 out of 10 performance into a 6 out of 10 narrative. The plot and the scares it conjures up, pun absolutely intended, feel wholly at odds with the effort that went into giving it such an atmospheric presence. It feels at times like they handcrafted a solid oak chest, gave it a gold trim and lined its innards with expensive silk solely for it to be home to a single jelly bean. And not even like a good flavour jelly bean. Like a shitty licorice one that you only resort to eating when you've exhausted all the others and your cupboards are empty. It's just so middling and dull. If you remember earlier, I summed the whole thing up in a short paragraph. And that wasn't in some kind of conscious effort to veil any spoilers or anything. It's just that there's not much else to it other than what I said. The character's initial charm comes through on the strength of the cast's efforts and the occasional nice bit of building and writing. I really like an early sequence, for example, which cemented the personalities of the main cast with a brief but charming gag that had a kind of Buster Keaton-style delivery in its reveal. The moment saw Father Burke presumptuously load his bags onto what he assumed was Frenchie's truck that would take them to the Abbey, only for the truck to pull away without them and reveal Frenchie stood next to his actual mode of transport, a horse and cart, and this elicited chuckles from Irene. From just this brief exchange, you can tell everything you need to know about the characters. Irene's giggling paints her as a little innocent, Burke's actions followed by his "I have no time for this shit" face gives him a sense of being out of his depth while also showing him to be a little overly serious, and Frenchie's roguish smirk and casual whistle to the driver that gets the truck to pull over so they can get their gear back paints him as the confidently laddish man about town. Solid stuff. Unfortunately, once the spooky goings-on start, the plot and character development begins to feel like it's really phoning it in. What could have been a compelling mystery driven by three likeable protagonists just becomes a vehicle for jump scares. If it wasn't for the great lighting and tense atmosphere, I could honestly see this feeling like a bit of a masochistic chore. Any moment of plot progression from the arrival to the Abbey onwards for me felt a little substanceless. We're told Father Burke has a troubled past, but the reveal of what it is falls flat, and rather than be a driving factor that steers the narrative arc of his character, all it kinda does is inform his jump scares. The idea that he has to face his greatest failure should be more narratively compelling than his greatest failure is going to jump out of the shadows at him and yell boo. Similarly, the nun herself could have been something really enigmatic and shrouded in mystery, or maybe if they wanted to go down that route, being some kind of commentary on the anxieties of the protagonist Irene, who, early in the film, is clearly shown to have some kind of clashing ideology with the religion she follows and hesitancy towards taking her vows, which a character even goes so far as to actively point out. You would think a literal evil nun would be the perfect manifestation of those concerns, especially since they even go to the trouble of colour-coding their habits, a pure white on Irene to contrast massively with the dark black evil of the antagonists. Make no mistake, costume designers think a lot about what they are doing. That won't have been coincidental. But as far as I could tell, this mirror imagery never really comes into focus or comments on anything, and both Burke's past and Irene's worries are just kind of tidily resolved, and the resolution didn't ever seem to come as a result of the journey they go on. It's not that they don't have arcs, they do come out of the other end of the film somewhat different. It's just that I personally failed to see the steps that got them there. Everything interesting just kind of fizzles out in favour of "Rawr, I'm a spooky ghost!" A central plot device of a key kind of goes exactly the way you would expect it to. The nun herself turns out to be a completely uncompelling villain, the fact that she takes on the form of a nun being purely circumstantial to her surroundings, and the origins of the demon are literally nothing more than it's evil as shit. Granted, it is hard to write a physical manifestation of a jump scare in any engrossing way, but I feel like there could have maybe been a villain who acted as a corrupted force within the church or something that unleashed the nun. Sort of like how the corporations, not the demons, were the real villain in the 2016 Doom reboot. This could have also been a great foe to Irene's clear skepticism with the church. Her eventually choosing to take her vows and become a nun could have come from a conscious effort to prevent this kind of corruptive force. I'm just spitballing here. The point is, though, the actual villain has no real impact on the plot other than to be an opposing force that just exists to be scary and is ultimately nothing interesting. Of course, it is at least still a fair bit scary, though, but it almost ruins that by being way too over-reliant on jump scares. Now, I do get that a jump scare here and there is kind of the modus operandi for mainstream horror movies, and to some extent almost all horror movies, to a point where if a horror film didn't dish out a steady stream of them, a general audience might even take issue with it. That said, there's a point of diminishing fucking returns, lads. Once the nun gets going, I swear to Christ, pun intended, it gets in the habit, also pun intended, of throwing them out every 30 seconds or so. It completely milks the loud, jolty, sudden noise shtick for all it's worth, that it actually comes at the expense of its atmosphere, trading gothic dread for what is essentially that old scary maze game everyone did reaction videos to 5 years ago. I mean, put it this way, one of the biggest jumps that occurred across my crowd that were watching the movie in the cinema was when a torch got blown out. Nothing else happened. There was nothing in the dark or anything and no follow-up scare, but we all jumped to the fucking heavens anyway because the filmmakers decided that something as devastatingly terrifying as a fire being extinguished warranted a great big fuck-off blast of sudden violin strings. Are you kidding us, lads? It's a fucking torch getting blown out, not the sudden apocalypse. I don't need you to blast the 7 trumpets 3 inches from me ear like you're signaling the sudden rapture. Jesus, man. I can only have so many heart attacks in one go, lads. It got so bad that by the time that bit in the trailer that always freaked me out came around, my heart was less frail and timid and more like a grizzled jump scare vet, pumped with so many jumps it had basically become immune to them and choosing instead of leaping in terror to beat its chest and say, fucking try and give me a fright, you spooky cow, I'll smash your pasty white face in, you treacherous snake woman. All of these scares often come as a result of great leaps of logic too and contrived circumstances. You would think, for example, that regardless of your investigation, if you were to visit an abbey and, I don't know, suddenly be buried alive by a young boy who vomits snakes, that when you get out of what was almost your early grave, you might, I don't know, leave the fucking abbey? Apparently these guys, though, are super professional and they'll get the job done, snake vomiting children be damned. The third act twist as well also relies on an extremely contrived coincidence that the main characters just happen to keep finding themselves in situations where they are apart for prolonged periods of time, so that one cannot tell the other a vital piece of information that might be relevant to them, so that when it is revealed it can be a big shocker. It doesn't shock anyone at all, of course, nor does it really have any consequence to the overall narrative. Even if it was a surprising reveal, it wouldn't matter as the film would remain almost the exact same with or without the reveal. By the time the ending comes along, it sort of turns into a fan-pleasing CGI fest that feels more appropriate to a big action blockbuster than a gothic horror. That said, it was a nice change of pace from the, at that point, worn-out tediousness of watching the cinematic equivalent of what equated to an offbeat Jack-in-the-Box. Oh, and as a final point, I know I'm not the audience for this because I haven't seen all the films in this franchise and I'm not remotely interested in their connective tissue, but doing this whole MCU joint Conjuring universe thing, while not a bad idea in concept, in execution feels more forced than a YouTuber beef. This film does the exact same thing as Annabelle Creation did, shoehorning in a closing 30-second epilogue that skips decades into the future in order to wink at members of the audience with a, oh shit, look at what we're implying here. But as a member of the audience who isn't all that familiar with the franchise, I have fucking zero idea who anyone was in the closing moments of this and Annabelle, or what any of the events they were referring to are, and it was really jarring to me. I know the MCU does the same thing, but where they get it right is that for the most part, even without knowledge of what films are coming up or what characters these post-credit sequences are referencing, they still at least have the decency to make some degree of sense to someone not in the know. The Conjuring stuff I'm sure is cool if you're big into the universe. If you're anything like me, these ends might as well be literal gibberish. So yeah, closing sentiments. Come for the production values and setting, stay for the good few scares, but leave by the end with them having outstayed their welcome and without the slightest takeaway from the plot. Its narrative is nowhere near Slenderman levels of absent, but it's so threadbare, you'd probably get a more compelling haunting from one of those naff ghost hunter shows where they bring on a psychic.
Activity there with... You alright? Alright. What is it, Derek? You alright? Mary loves Dick. Mary loves Dick.